Welcome to Amra's Armchair Anecdotes. I'm Amra Pajevic, writer, teacher and storyteller. Pull up a chair and let's dive into stories about writing, life and lessons learned, sharing wisdom from my armchair to yours. You can find the episode show notes, your free episode handouts and my how-to guides at amrapajevic.com/podcast. And now it's time to dive in. I'm joined today by Violeta Matijevic-Bagia, author, writing coach, and a fierce advocate for using storytelling as a way to make sense of things we don't always have language for. She's navigated both traditional and independent publishing, written across genres from sci-fi to literary fiction, and built a coaching practice focused on helping writers move from stuck ideas to finished work. Today we talk about what actually keeps writers stuck, the reality behind hybrid publishing, the risks of writing trauma, and what happens when your creative identity starts to shift underneath you. And we're also going to squeeze in menopause. We've decided we're going to make sure that we get that in this conversation. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Welcome, Violeta.
Oh, thank you so much, Amina. It's absolutely pleasurable to be here.
I know, it's so good because we came across each other online. I don't know how, you popped up on my feed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I like what you're doing. I like what you're representing. And I just kind of, with this podcast, I just look for people that I think would be interesting to have a conversation with and have something to say. Because you're so articulate, I was like, this is definitely someone. But before we start, we were just talking about today is the first 1 year anniversary of your novel, Andrea Nekic is Not Fine. So I just wanted to hear more about that.
I know, how's that for timing?
I know.
Everything's just so fortuitous. It's just like sliding doors moments. I love it. And thank you for those accolades. I do hope I can appear articulate today. I am caffeinated. It's good.
Yes.
Hopefully everyone will agree. But yeah, Andrea Nekic is Not Fine came out 1 year ago today, which is so exciting and probably one of my most pivotal book that I've written. Obviously, all my other work has a dear place in my heart, but this one's extra special. So it's awesome. Really cool to be here and get to talk about her as well.
Yeah, so why do you think that, why are you saying that it's the most pivotal one for you? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So she's really pivotal for me because it was the first time I ventured into literary fiction. When I first started, it was science fiction, it was young adult, it was dystopian, a bit of space opera for all my Star Wars nerds. And, it felt great. I loved writing those stories and, of course, injecting, real life events and traumas and problems that someone may face, but in an accessible and fun environment. Whereas Andrea Nekic, I wanted to get into the nitty-gritty headspace of myself. And it just so happened to be that I started writing it maybe a week or two into our first lockdowns here in Victoria. As I'm sure the whole world knows, we had the worst lockdowns. They went on forever, which was actually a great time for me creatively. I wrote a few books, which was amazing. But specifically Andrea, she came to me. I wrote her in 28 days, something like that. It was wild. She basically took over my entire being and it just had to be done. And it was also healing for me because it's a fictionalized retelling of the events of my life. So growing up, coming to Australia as an immigrant, facing bullies, facing the whole, you don't quite belong there, but you don't quite belong here. It was a weird juxtaposition in life and kind of a hard thing to learn as, a 4 or 5 year old. So that was really interesting. It was interesting putting all of that into words and into something that I knew that somebody would eventually read and have a deep insight into what, happened in my brain, I guess. And then, I guess if anyone is familiar with the book, it deals with sexual assault and attempted suicide. So, I threw basically everything that went on in my life, I threw it at this book and it stuck and it worked really well. And fortunately, my publisher thought so too, and they signed her on. So long story short, we're here a year later. The book has been out. It's been amazing. And I feel amazing having shared that story. So it's been very liberating, I would say.
Yeah, you do have because my debut memoir and then my memoir, just what you were talking about, because I lived overseas and we come sort of from the same region, what was once Yugoslavia.
Yes.
And is now different. And so I lived in Bosnia when it was Yugoslavia. And I came over here, even though I was born here, but I went there eight until the ages of 12. And then you come over and it is such a culture shock.
Yeah.
Such a culture shock. Like basically Yugoslavia was like 20, 30 years into the
Yep.
past, in
Yeah.
terms of expectations. And for me, it was really difficult. I went into school, I didn't know what periods were, what tampons were.
Yeah. No,
So,
nothing.
yeah, suddenly everyone's like, you're supposed to pash. I'm like, what's that?
Yeah.
Get on? What?
What?
Yeah, it was just a huge, huge culture shock. And you face the bullying because you end up being like that little grandmother in the corner going, no, 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 we don't do this. This is not how we behave. And apparently teenagers and young people don't like hearing those things,
No, no.
especially from someone who's their age. So
Yep.
it's very cathartic getting
Yes.
those. So we're going to come back a little bit to the themes behind Andrea Nekic in terms of writing about trauma. But I sort of wanted to first transition into being a writer, and you've done both independent and traditional publishing, and then going into being a writing coach. So take us through that process.
Well, yeah, look, I think the writing coach aspect actually was born off the back of having navigated both streams. When I first had that dream of wanting to be a writer and author and being published, there was obviously self-publishing existed, but in my brain it didn't. It was a stream I was not interested in. I had blinkers on. For me, success was I want to land a publisher. I want to know that I've done this work and that somebody has deemed it worthy. You can look at that and unpack it however you will. I'm sure my
No,
therapist will unpack it either way.
there are benefits because I went through the same thing as you,
Yeah.
traditional to independent.
Yes.
And I see people who went straight into independent and they really struggle with a sense of self-worth, even though they are making bank and they are entrepreneurs and unbelievably business minded. But it is terrible how there is this sense of, oh, someone did actually pick me.
Yeah.
And they did,
Yeah.
give me that tap on the shoulder. It's almost like that fairy godmother gave us a
Yeah.
tap on the shoulder. And so the advantage is that there is a lot of noise that we don't have,
Yeah.
that perhaps if you don't have that pathway, you might have. Yeah.
I agree. And look, it's been, I think, paramount in my learning of myself and how I write, how I process, how I, publish, how I promote my work. All of that, I think, came off the back of, having gone through those hard yards of the rejections, of the rewrites, of the it's not good enough, but you can do this, and so on and so forth. And I think because I had gone through all that, I understand the depth of work that goes behind the scenes in order to have a finished product. Versus, I think even when I attempted, my first self-published book, I still kind of had that, oh, but I can just, hit publish and it's out there. Like, who cares? But of course I care because I'd been through all the hard yards in the other stream, and I saw, how many rounds of editing it takes, how many fine-tooth comb rereads it takes, how many people need to look over it in order to make sure that, in one scene she's not wearing sandals and in the very next scene she's wearing sneakers, right? It's all the little details. And I think because I had such she was a very, very detailed and detail-oriented editor with my publisher, my first publisher, that it taught me to put that hat on myself. And I think because I had such a good experience with her, it's now taught me to, I guess, translate that kind of experience into my self-publishing work, which I still do. There are still some books that I choose to keep purely for myself, for the fun, and I publish them independently. And then I've got the two publishers that I work with for some of my other projects. So I think for me, I will continue both streams. And I think that's where my expertise comes in when I'm working with aspiring writers, because, whether they're wanting to chase that publishing dream with a publisher or go independent, I can help with both sides because I've done them both quite intimately. So, for me, it's great. I'm like, you want to do this self-published? Fantastic. Let's do it. We need to learn how to market, promote. We need to do the research. We need to go here, and we need to source a designer and an editor and a typesetter, a format, whatever it is, right? But then on the other side of that, if they're looking at that independent, the traditional publishing route, I can also help them research, do you want an agent? Do you want to do this solo? How do we find, publishers that are accepting unsolicited manuscripts? So I've got the experience from both sides. So I think that puts me in a great position for pretty much everyone, which is great.
No, I do agree because, I view my publishing, and I think you do the same. It was like an apprenticeship into the publishing world. We had the editors that were supporting us in terms of learning how to do the craft and to improve on the craft.
Yeah.
But then we also, had the publicist, we had, people doing all these things for us. And then when you are the independently published and you are the publisher, you need to do all of the writing, the editing, the proofreading, the layout, the cover, thinking about the metadata, making sure that that's all
Of
up
course.
to scratch. And then there's the whole marketing side of it.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, which, to be honest, in one sense is 50% of the job and takes
Yeah.
up quite a bit of time. So yeah, it is a huge advantage. So you're doing both and you're doing the writing coaching. And also like one of the things that I was really struck by is the way that you have really embraced the promotion side of it and really building that audience and really connecting with readers. What are some of the things that you've learned through that process?
I think the biggest thing I've learned, and I am continuing to learn, is that, there's obviously trends that take off, make you go viral, and it's not something that I've hit yet, maybe someday, but it's also something I'm not chasing anymore. And that's the biggest lesson I've learned. I think when I was trying to fit myself in a shape that I didn't belong in, the content that I was putting out didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel like anything that any of my readers would appreciate or, gel with. And that's the last thing I want. For me, especially with Andrea and the books that I'm subsequently writing, everything is about connection and the realness of human story and human trauma and how humans connect. And so I found, again, the biggest lesson for me is the more I try to sort of squeeze myself into this little perfect shape of what, media and socials looks like for an aspiring author, it just didn't work. I had virtually no interactions, no connections. People couldn't care less about anything I was putting out there because I didn't care in what I was doing, and it comes across, right? So the second I learned that and understood it, I pared it back completely. I was like, you know what? I think I mentioned to you before we jumped on the call, I'm being real. Like if I waffle a lot, sometimes I don't say words, I miss words because my brain's going too fast. It happens. But obviously the people that are there, still listening, still following, are there because they like that content. And it's unfiltered, unedited. I don't bother. I'm just putting out my true self, my book's trueness, everything that's about it. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned. So I think I'm actually having fun with it now. It felt like a chore. It felt like what you said, 50% of your job as a writer is literally sitting out here and promoting yourself. And I hated it so much. I can't tell you how much I hated it. But it is the reality of the job. If you are an author, whether it's traditionally published or independently, the onus is still on you to put your book out there, right? Your publisher can help, your publicist can help, but you still need to do, a lot of it, right? And that's just a part of it. So I think the biggest learning curve I had was enjoy it, and it will come across authentically and people will buy into that and into the story you're selling. And that's what I've learned, and I've really enjoyed it since. So it's no longer a chore.
Yeah, and how do you sort of navigate the promoting of your books and the promoting of your business? How are you doing those two things?
Look, I'm still yet to learn. So full disclosure, I don't think I'm quite there yet, but I'm trying to keep them somewhat separate. But where there is an intersect, I try to post on both. So I have, my Right Point Coaching Instagram page and then my Violeta Matijevic-Bagia page, which is, specifically for anything to do with my writing and some of my personal life, because, people like to see what's going on behind the scenes. So if where there is an intersect, I do tend to post the same sort of content on both. Sometimes, there might be a cross-pollination, which I think works really nicely. But the key thing I've sort of picked up from a few people kind of reaching out and saying, on the Right Point Coaching page, it's like, hey, how do you go about your actual writing? I'm like, oh, there's actually like an appetite for this. Why don't I bring across some of that content into this content and vice versa? And that seems to have worked a treat. So I think it's being authentic. I can't be a writing coach without being a writer, and I can't be a writer without being a writing coach. So there is naturally going to be an intersect there at some point. So I figured, why not, obviously have some direction, which I think you need with everything, but then share it in ways that seems to work organically as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. When we all start social media, there is an element of feeling like you are walking naked.
Oh yes,
And it is so uncomfortable.
so gross.
And yeah, and you feel like, oh, I'm just shouting, look at me, look at me,
Look at
but
mine.
look at me. And then you get to a
Careful
point
of
where
us.
and then you're like, actually, you know what? That's not the energy I need to put out there.
No.
It's just the energy of, because I had to also do that thing of changing my thinking and make it about I am sharing. I
Yeah.
am sharing things I've learned. I'm sharing my journey. I'm just sharing my news. And that's what took away that yuckiness of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, because if you're just sharing and you're just sort of having a yarn and you're just trying to be yourself, and I think in this day and age, one of the things that someone I'm a big admirer of, I don't know if you've come across a Joanna Penn from the Creative Pen.
Yeah.
One of the things that she said recently with all of this AI, and she's very AI positive, is she goes, when we talk on social media and we make those mistakes and we are not perfect, that proves that we're actually human.
Yeah.
And so that has also made it easier for me, like what you're talking about in terms of that waffling and that not trying to be like that perfect package, because that is just proving that humanity and that who we are and what we have to offer.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. And the human touch is the backbone of being a creative, right? Like yeah, AI can do some incredible art. I've actually recently been using it so much to, just like fangirl over my own books, and I'm like, do me an illustration of my two favorite characters, that I've written, and it's amazing. It's wild. Like it feels like my worlds have come to life and I can see them. Obviously, I don't use it for anything. It's just for me to, enjoy seeing them come to life in a way. But yeah, it does these amazing things, but still, it's not drawn by a human. It's not drawn by somebody, I've commissioned to do an art piece for me. And like I feel even with articles or blurbs, whatever it is, as gross as writing blurbs is, I hate it with a passion. It is still something I will do hand on heart, by hand, and I will suffer through it and struggle through it, because that's the backbone of it, of being a creative. Whether it's an artist, a musician, a writer, you need to have that process of hating every line you've written in order to really appreciate the ones you love at the end, right? And if
Yeah.
AI just does it for you, you haven't really experienced or learned through anything, I feel.
Yeah, I think because I've had the advantage, like you a little bit, in terms of that traditional publishing and then independently publishing before AI. So I've developed a lot of those skills so I
Yeah.
can do like the rough thing. But what I love is putting it through and getting that support to keep refining,
Yeah.
which is what I would spend hours on before, like, every single word. Whereas now it's just that faster processing.
Well, yeah. Something
So
like Grammarly is just, it's amazing, right? Like I obviously read and write good, but
but
sometimes when the brain is not braining, it's really nice to have Grammarly there, be like, hey, is this the word you really meant, or are we going down
yeah,
this direction, right? And I'm somebody, I've got a master's degree in literature, I've got another degree in writing. Like I can obviously read and write good, but the brain sometimes needs assistance. So, your
yeah.
tools that pop out that help us, I'm so here for it.
Yeah. And, like when we are in this world where we are having to do so much, yeah, it is. I just wanted to sort of go back to, because, the traditional publishing is really becoming hard now. And so there is a lot more expectation of authors to have their books at a good position, to
Yeah.
really be as polished as possible. How's that? Are you seeing some of that in terms of your coaching and supporting authors to then be able to submit to traditional publishing?
Yeah, look, that has been quite a common pain point I've kind of experienced with a lot of the people that I've worked with. And like I'm there for it. I can help them refine. It's something I'm really passionate about. But what I'm more passionate about is, I guess, even before you get to that stage, is making sure that it's refined to a point where you're happy with it. We're not talking about refined for the industry yet, because sometimes I feel if we are working towards getting it refined for industry, we're not telling the true story in the way that it should be told. with the rawness, with the mistakes, with the learning curve going through it. So what I tend to try and, guide people towards is, let's write this in the way that you want to write it. Don't worry about making it sound good or pretty or, whatever it is. We can fluff it out. We can cut it if we need to, but we need to make sure that what we've told is the version we want to tell. Because I've experienced that. I did change my first book. That was the first one that was ever signed onto a traditional publisher. I changed it so much to a point where I didn't even recognize the book anymore, but I did it because that's what the industry deemed, a requirement. And it landed the publisher. Great, happy days. But I still had that feeling deep inside where I'm like, this is not my story. This is not the way my character would have progressed with her life, which I'm not going to waffle on too much about it. But this is the book that ended up, they signed on all 5 books. I had my rights reverted back to me maybe 4 years in, and then I self-published the whole thing with the characters the way I wanted them done, right? And then a few years later, my current publisher actually asked if I wanted to republish with them, but in a way where I could keep the story as authentic as I wanted to. And I think that was the difference between being strong enough to say, I'm fighting for my characters and the story, and if you don't want it that way, I'm happy to go self-publish. It's fine. I don't care.
Yeah, and that's what people don't realize, because when I had my debut novel picked up, I had 2 offers. And I met with each editor, and they had a very different version of how the story should be rewritten. And I ended up going with the editor that I thought gelled most with my vision. And then even with my memoir, I had my agent like, we need to, I had originally read it in first person and third person in my mum's point of view. And then the agent was like, to make it more commercial, we need to change it into first person. And I had Alice Pung, who was my mentor, who was like, no, you shouldn't be changing it. It really works. But that's the thing, when you're so desperate for publication, you really kind of, weigh up, I'm going to give up that vision because I want that tap on the shoulder. And so there are those compromises that have to be made in the traditional publishing space. And the independent publishing space, you do have more of that, ownership, that you are the one making the decisions ultimately.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, that is such a great space to be in when you do have that freedom and the flexibility to really own what you're putting out there, as long as you're comfortable with all of the other aspects, the promotion and then the marketing and then getting it edited and polished up, which, there are so many amazing editors out there that you can find on, through word of mouth. I'm sure like everybody in this space, most of your listeners will be in the writing space to some degree. So I'm sure every single person here can share, an editor they've worked with or somebody that they're really fond of, or heard through the grapevine, another one who's a really great editor, or we're definitely not short of choices, which is amazing in this day and age. So I feel like whichever route people do decide to take, there are so many options now to get your book to that polished state, whether it is like I had to, change it up to meet requirements or not, say that this is my story, these are my characters, and I'm going forth as they are. And like I said, especially with that book series, I'm so glad I got to experience both sides, because now I know kind of how to really play both sides. Like I understand what is commercially acceptable and how to toe that line, right?
Yeah. And also when you do the independent publishing and you're dealing with the cost of production and the cost of all of that background stuff, you have a different perspective with publishers where you're risk averse because you actually have to put money into it. But having said that, I still do have a problem with the traditional publishing model. There are some great publishers, as you found, and as I found, where they really work with you. But there is that huge inequity where they are paying you for your rights, and therefore they make all of the decisions and kind of mold you into what they think you should be. And then you're getting the tiniest percentage of the pie.
Yes.
Like when we look at the sales price, you are getting the 10% because of all the different chunks of that pie.
Of course. And, that's yet another thing that, you have to really consider when you're sort of going down either route, right? For me, I always say to my husband, I'm like, I love this writing thing. I love, the feeling of it. I love, the taps on the shoulder. But I would really like some money too. Like that would be nice, right? So it's like where do we draw that line? And I think, but I always say, hand on heart, I'm like, I do this for the love of it. Anything else is a bonus. Especially Andrea, she was so important to me. I needed to get this book and this story out there that, I was just like, it doesn't really matter how it gets out there, it just needs to be out there. I was lucky that it landed in the lap of a really amazing team, and I was so proud and honored. To this day, I've not worked with a better team in that space. Obviously, all my other books have been sci-fi, so it's a little bit different, but still, right? It's the care and the attention that the book got, but not just the book, but me as a person, especially being such a personal story, just there was so much checking in and making sure that I was happy with how things were done and why the suggested changes were suggested. It wasn't just a matter of, well, for commercial reasons. It's like, okay. It's like sometimes I need a little more, please.
Well, and that's the thing, like when you are writing things that are so personal and you're wanting to do it because you know that your experience is something that is going to help other people. Because when I was writing my memoir, about being parented by a mum who suffers from bipolar, she was so generous in sharing her story and in sharing the reality. And originally I had all of the names changed, and then she said, no, you could use my
Yeah.
actual name.
Yeah.
And I just remember her crying so much when we were getting letters and emails from people who had read and felt that connection.
Yeah.
And so, that's why it's so important to be protected and to really honor the story. How was it for you in terms of, writing this story that was so personal, and carried a lot of emotional trauma, but you really wanted to sort of advocate and to share that? Because I see that as something that you're also doing on your space online where you're
Yeah.
advocating. So how's that been for you?
Look, it's been challenging. The book actually sent me to therapy. So so that's, I guess it's a bonus. It's good because I got to really focus on addressing things that I perhaps hadn't, or I thought I've dealt with it in my own ways. And and I think for a while you can, right? But at some point something breaks the camel's back and you have to, address it. And so, this was a great catalyst. It helped me write the book, but it also sent me to therapy. So it helped me kind of get to really good, comfortable places with myself, which, I'd never really shared with either of my parents what kind of transpired or what went on in high school. So that was yet another catalyst for me to actually sit down and have this conversation with my parents. And, there was crying, and there was, like, I wish you told us, and like, I wish I'd told them too. I would have been less lonely, right? Going through all of that alone when I was 18, because, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you would probably tend to agree, right? Being raised, I guess, in that Balkan household, you grow up, right? Whether it's because you have a sibling to look after, or because it's just the way it is, or because, you've experienced things like war and you've had to come here and just grow up, right? So whatever it is, it's kind of taken away what should have been more of a childhood and placed you in this neither here nor there kind of, almost, I don't know, it's like a weird in between space where, you're still a child and you're still wanting to do all these things, but then you're also a little bit more mature than most children because of the things you've seen and done. So it puts you in a very interesting place. Like I said at the start of the podcast, where I experienced that bullying at the start, and a lot of that was because of that kind of weird, like you said, that little grandma where you're sitting there and you're like, this is not, because I myself was born in Bosnia. So yeah, we had that kind of upbringing. It's like, no, this is not the way we do things. And it's definitely not the way that anybody in our,
No,
would
no.
do. So it was like a culture shock, right? You're like, oh, this is bizarre. And so yeah, that paints a target on your back. So I think, I now, being a parent myself, I have, I guess, the lens of a parent in also understanding how my parents, who came here with nothing, would have felt, and how challenging that would have been, and how isolating. And then there's me, this child that they're also having to now be like, oh, like everything's good, it's going to be okay. And, you can clearly see that it's not. They're struggling in their own way. I'm struggling my own way. So there's this butting of heads, and nobody really understands because, again, in that Balkan background, the conversation wasn't really about feelings or emotions, right? It's kind of like, we just get it done because we have to get it done, and we just move on, right? And so now, as a parent, As somebody who's gone to therapy, as somebody who I'd like to think is quite, open with discussing feelings, I sat them both down. I said, look, these are the feelings. This is what I'm going to write about. This is the book. I've changed names because, for legal reasons, obviously. But this is what it's about. So I don't want you guys to pick up the book and be like, oh dear, like, what is this? So I wanted full transparency. And, my parents and my sister and I, we all have a great relationship. We're super close. And I think, again, this book, so important to me. It's actually brought us closer now because we've all had that chance to, explain everything and have a proper conversation, 20 years later, but nonetheless, like, it's here.
That's the thing, because there is in our culture there is very much. I mean, on the one hand, everything's talked about, huge gossip and
Oh, yeah.
all of the terrible stories that
Of
people
course.
go through. But then on the other hand, there are certain things that are unseemly and that you kind of just put aside and you submerge
Yeah.
and you hide. I was just going to say, writing my memoir also sent me into therapy. So I think all good books,
They send you there.
because they send you into therapy, because for me, I was writing about, growing up, but then there was also, sexual abuse and being, I don't know, when you're a child that has a parent that is not very aware and is not present, there are a lot of people that take advantage, and there is a lot of predators that come out. If you're okay with it, I was just wanting to ask a question in terms of how it affected your parenting, because for me, I have these talks with people where they like, I'll have the sex talk with my
Yeah.
children, and I'm like, I'm like, I had conversations with my daughter before she could even know what,
Yeah.
I never wanted her to be like, this is what sex is.
Yeah.
Because my first experience with the sex talk was when someone was taking advantage of me and me
Yeah.
telling my mum and thinking that was a game, not
Yeah.
realizing that it was molestation. And
Yeah.
so I had this view, I will never have my daughter not know what sex is.
Yeah.
And that there are people in the world that might do things that are not okay, because it's not
Yeah.
enough just to say stranger danger. You kind of really
Yeah.
have to unpack a
You
lot
have.
of things, because predators start out with flattery, with ingratiating themselves. There's
Yes.
a whole process there. So I was just wondering, do you feel comfortable talking about how that might have impacted on your parenting also?
Yeah, look, I'm still in the very early stages. My daughter's not even 5 yet. So thankfully, I've got a little bit more time, but we definitely do really go in with the setting boundaries conversation. Even as a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, we've taught, like, if we're tickling and she's like, no, stop, we're like, okay, stop, done, right? Like, no questions asked, or, can mummy have a kiss for bed? No, it's like, okay, good night, whatever, right? But small steps where it is really clear to her that boundaries and that no means no, or not right now means no, or maybe later means no, right? The boundaries are really important, and we've establish that even amongst ourselves, right? Like, if, mummy and daddy are having a cuddle in the kitchen and I'm like, not now, I'm trying to cook, he'll immediately step away. So it's all visible to her. And especially in such formative years, these are the things that they will learn and understand. And even now, when she's having play dates, and other friends are like, oh, do you want to do this? She's very confident in saying no. And that is so important, because that's something I never
Yes.
had. I never had that, because I had this ingrained, just be polite, smile, do whatever the adult says, because that's the way it's done.
Yes,
Right? And
our
so
culture. You
culture,
kiss people. They
hug
force you.
them,
You hug them. You shut up if they put you on their lap.
your
You
lap,
have to be
yes.
quiet, and you have to be. So
Yes.
they're basically training you
Yeah,
to be biddable, and
exactly.
that is the children that are in a sense magnets
Yeah.
for the predators.
Exactly. And that's what happened to me. I was 18, fell into a relationship with this guy who said all the right things, did all the right things. And even when it was something I didn't want to do or was uncomfortable to say no, I couldn't do it, because I had no idea, I had no voice. I didn't understand that that's something I could do, and this is an 18-year-old girl, right? So could you
Yes.
imagine a child, like, if they don't have that articulation or the understanding or the confidence? I think it really comes down to the confidence in saying no and knowing that you're allowed to say no, that it's not going to be like, no, we don't say no to, to
Yes.
Barker or Dether. Like, what? It's like, no, you say it. Like, even my parents now, my mum will ask her, like, oh, do you want to, come and play this? And she'll say no. She's like, okay. So again, it's like, it's, thanks to this book, I've been able to have these conversations with my family as well, where now we all are on the same page and everyone understands. And obviously, living in Australia for so long, we've learned of the new ways. So
Yes.
it is, right?
Yeah.
It's something that's a lot easier. So I think when that conversation does have to come up eventually when she's older, it won't be so hard to say, well, if you don't like that thing, you just don't do the thing, or say no, or walk away, or even, I'll come and say no for you. Like, I'm here, I'm in your corner, right? It's not, and like, kudos to our mothers and our parents, and our grandmothers. They were also raised in this way. So how else could they teach us if they didn't know, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's this amazing thing that we have this opportunity now as Balkan women in Australia with all this knowledge and articulation to be able to teach the next generation of the way that things should be for them. So
Yes.
yeah, so I think we're so fortunate to be able to do that now.
Yeah, I agree, because I feel like I'm getting to be the parent that I needed and that I
Yeah.
wanted. And that's healed a
To
lot of my
protect and
trauma.
heal the inner child, that's right.
Yeah, yeah, which really helped. I also just wanted to talk about, when we write trauma and then we're sort of out there advocating and wanting to share our stories to help people, but then also, sometimes it can lead to emotional fatigue and
Yeah.
those boundaries in itself, where people sometimes there's that vicarious thing where they want to know more than,
Yeah.
and you're like, no.
Mm.
But sometimes, it's just that emotional. Is there tips that you can share or conversations you can have for writers who might be exploring writing about their own trauma?
Yeah, look, the biggest bit of advice I can give is set those boundaries for yourself and rest when you need it. Because even going through the editing phase of this book, it was really challenging in the first sort of 3 or 4 months because we were on really tight schedules, and I think we were churning out like rounds of edits at every 3 to 4 weeks. And that's obviously going through the whole thing and unpacking the whole thing every single time, line by line. And, I think in the moment I can desensitize and be like, cool, it's just words on a page and we're just grammatically checking things to make sure they work for the sake of publication. But once that's done and the adrenaline's worn off, that's when that fatigue hits and you're like, oh, but I got to get to the next project. And that's what I did for months and months and months, because I was working on another book series with my other publisher, right? So there was no time to rest. It was just send these edits off, next edits come in, and you just work and work and work. But when the lull came, when both edits were sent off to respective publishers, it was just this fatigue that took over, and then you get sick, you get the flu, you get the cold, because your body's just shutting down. It's tired, it's unrested. The physiological effects of that kind of mental fatigue are a lot. And I learned very quickly that it wasn't me catching the flu every other week. It was literally my brain needs to rest, my soul needs to rest. And so that's what I'm really big and just a huge advocate on it now. It's like, you listen to your body, listen to your mind. If you're in a position where you can take a break and stop, then you need to do it. Obviously, if you've got deadlines looming and other commitments calling, you have to do them, right? But once it's done, you need to take that break and let yourself take the break. Again, another Balkan throw here. It's resting is laziness, right?
Yes.
So,
Oh my God, yes.
yeah. So,
Yes. What are you doing on the couch?
I
No.
know, what are you doing
Get
on the
up.
couch? There's things
Move.
that need to
Move.
be
There's always something to be done. Yeah,
Exactly. There's
and
always something to be done, right? So I think it took many, many, many years, and my husband being like, just sit on the couch, woman. It's like,
yeah.
go sit outside. I'm like, no, but I've got to do, I'll do it. You go sit, oh, but I've got to do, no, you need to sit. So it took a lot of that reminder daily from myself and my husband. Luckily, bless him, he's just so great in that reminder, right? That, that resting is not laziness, it's necessary in your mind, your body, your spirit, however you want to look at it, right? The trifecta. It needs
Yes.
to rest. It needs to rest so that you can be the best version of yourself to continue doing the work, right? And I've learned the hard way, because then I've gone back over edits that I've been doing when I was not rested, and it is like it's dog's breakfast. It's not great. And then I've made more work for myself because then I have to go back over it again.
Yeah.
Had I just taken the time to rest and recuperate and then go back with a fresh set of eyes, it would have been a different story. So yeah, that's my word of advice, is listen to your body when it gets to that point where you're feeling fatigued and emotional and tired. It's not you being weak or lazy, it's you needing a rest.
I have this thing where I'm like, which brain have I got? If it's like the tired brain, then it's like the low level where I'm doing something, because I find it hard to not be moving forward in some way.
Yep.
So I have like constant to-do lists, and it's like, which brain do I have?
Yeah.
and also learning the hard lesson of certain things you cannot do when you are tired. They
Yeah.
have to wait. They
I
have
have
to wait
to.
for the good brain. There's
Yes.
no point.
No.
Well, I wanted to really get back to our perimenopause
Yes.
conversation because we started and you said that you are 37 years old and you have gone into perimenopause, and
Yeah.
that's not something that's very common. We're
No.
finding out now that it does happen,
Does happen.
but you do get gaslit by the medical profession a
Yeah.
lot, just in general, doesn't matter even if you're in your 40s.
Yeah.
But can you share a little bit about what happened, what your journey's been with that?
Yeah, look, it honestly started. So my daughter is now almost 5. So everything in the last sort of year or so, I was constantly thinking it's probably still hormonal related. Maybe it's just, the periods are trying to settle, the body's trying to settle. And I'm so fortunate I have such an incredible GP, and she has been with me pretty much since I moved into this area. So maybe 13 years now or so. And she said, no, honey, I think it might be perimenopause. And I was like, oh, tell me more. Because only maybe 2 or 3 days before that conversation, I was speaking to a really good friend of mine, and she's only a year older than me. Yep, 1 year older. And she said she had a conversation with her GP, and her GP said, most likely you are entering perimenopause. I hadn't even heard of the term. So this is
Yes.
how great our education is. I didn't even know the term. I was like, what is this perimenopause you speak of? So I went home, did all the Google. I'm like, oh, this sounds an awful lot like the things I'm going through. So I booked myself in. GP was available that following Friday and said, hey, could this be a thing? Because this is what I'm experiencing. So for me, I've got the Balkan hot blood, right? It runs through me. It's like quick, right? Like 0 to 100 in like 0.1 second, yeah? But it's usually, I can usually pinpoint when it's that, and I can usually pinpoint when it's hormonal, because I became obsessed with tracking my periods and how I feel. I've got an app, I've got a calendar and a reminder. It tells me today you might be feeling back pains or whatever it is, right? So I knew things weren't what the calendar said. I'm like, okay, this is a little something different, right? And I think the first sign was, my period surprised me one day. It came like a week and a half early. That's never happened in my life, right? I'm like, okay, like this is strange, but we can deal with it. And then every month after, it was either only one day or 7 days, or it came a week and a half later or 2 weeks earlier, or it just didn't come at all. I'm like, okay, this is something else. And then, naturally I was like, okay, it could be stress, it could be, the anxiety and depression, because I was going through the editing of the book. So I was like, it could be anything, right? And then, yeah, the GP was like, no, most likely it's this, because, she's like, we have tracked everything for X amount of years, almost 13 years of clockwork periods you could set, your watch and calendar to suddenly being out every single month, like clockwork, it was out. And then, yeah, came the hot flushes, sweating profusely, wake up, my bed is drenched. I have an elderly dog. I'm like, did she pee the bed? Did I
I
pee the bed?
know. You just don't know what's happening. You're like, what is this?
Exactly.
What fresh hell is this? How am I going through this?
Literally. I'm like, it's winter. Like, I mean, I've got pajamas on, but, just a normal doona, like nothing overly
Yeah.
warm, and since pregnancy, I'm like, I've been running a little bit hotter, but like this was completely out of the ordinary, right? It's like, it's why I thought, I literally thought the dog had peed the bed, or I peed the bed. Like,
Yeah.
what's happening?
You're like, it could happen. It could happen after what we went through with childbirth. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I was like, I mean, I didn't rule anything out. But no, definitely not. Like, it's my clothes, everything, hair glued to my body, completely wet as if I'd just come out of the shower. And it would happen day after day after day to just nothing. Then in the middle of the day, it's cold, it's freezing, everyone's in parkas, and like, I'm just like, oh my God, I can't stop sweating.
Yes.
I'm like smelling myself in the car. I'm like, is it me? Like, what's going on?
Yes, because
Yeah.
the odor changes.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I'm like, what? And I'm like, really? And having to change and put on, and have deodorant and stuff. You're like,
Yeah,
oh
literally
my God,
always in
this
my
is,
handbag now.
yeah.
My hair in the shower, clumps in the
Yeah.
sink, and I try to take care of it. I use treatments and, eat well and drink lots of water. I know there was just clumps in the shower and in my
Yeah.
hairbrush. So yeah, so I had that conversation. Luckily for me, I've heard so many awful stories of, yeah, medical professionals gaslighting female patients. It's just in your head, it's physiological, it's whatever, right? I was so lucky that, this GP that I spoke with was actually saying, look, it's not overly common, but it does happen, and we're learning more and more about it. So, this is potentially what it is. So it was just really refreshing to have a conversation where, I've realized, that fire, that like instant, mood shift, it wasn't just me, losing it or suddenly being like, oh, I can't stand anyone in my life. Like it's not
Yes.
like that at all.
It changed, and also for me, whenever I got the hot flushes, the rage,
Oh, yeah.
I actually blacked out. And I remember going into school because I'm a teacher, so it was really horrible. And I went into the school, and my year seven looked at me with his lovely blue eyes, and he said, "Please, Miss Palich, please don't be angry with us like you were yesterday."
No, bless.
And so I had to find a GP who dealt with menopause. I went to the Australasian Society of Menopause, and they have a list of GPs who are actually trained in it. And I went to her and I said, if this continues for much longer, I'm going to be out of a career. I'm not going to have any friends left, and I'm going to be divorced. Because I knew that things were bad when my daughter came in and sat next to me while we were watching TV, and she started singing, and I went into a rage.
No.
And it took me an hour to calm down, and I went, I don't think it's her. I think this really is me.
Yeah.
Yeah. What sort of treatment are you getting for it?
So nothing at this stage. At this stage, I think because she said it was still so early and such early days that she was like, let's just manage, see how we go. A lot of taking time for yourself and, stepping back from the things that,
I disagree with that vehemently.
Yeah.
I disagree with that vehemently.
What shall I do? Tell me.
Please go to either her or go to another GP that is on the Australasian Society of Menopause and explore hormone replacement therapy. Some people, for me, it saved my life, literally. I was getting, I would say almost suicidal, the mood and the feeling of my life and just my body. And I would keep trying to practice gratitude.
Yeah.
Where it's like, but I've got this and I've got that, but why? But you can't talk yourself out of it. You just cannot. And so for me, I'm on Implanon because I cannot have periods. I'm trying to say it, I'm learning how to say it, adenomyotrosis.
Okay.
So it's not endometriosis, it's a different type, but it's still the bleeding is going into my stomach.
Oh gosh,
and not where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so the only way to manage it is not to have periods. And so I'm on Implanon, which gives me the progesterone, and then I'm on estrogen gel.
Yeah.
Which once I started using that, the hot flushes vanished. My mood within 2 or 3 days stabilized. My libido came back. My tolerance. I even lost, I was turning into a sociopath, which was interesting, but I had no empathy at all. Yeah. I was completely savage. It was quite interesting, actually, because you know how you spend your whole life thinking about other people?
Yeah.
And then suddenly I don't care.
I don't care.
I don't care. It was nice. It was an interesting, now it's just nice boundaries.
Yeah, yeah.
But the biggest problem for me was I went into psychosis and started having ghosts in my bedroom, which was a fun few months.
That's terrible.
I know. So I'm now on antipsychotics, and I have never felt better in my life because I have never slept better as a lifelong insomniac. So I would very much encourage you and any woman in your situation to really look at hormone replacement therapy. Yeah. I've got a friend who it didn't work for, so she's trying natural therapies. But to be honest, I would say, let's say I know 10 women who are going through it. Yeah. 9 of them have gone on hormone replacement therapy and their life is just beautiful, a beautiful thing. Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, and in Australia, it's all covered by Medicare. Yeah. It works out to, $1 a day to put, the bottle you buy $30 and $1 a day for a treatment. And honestly, it literally saved my life.
Amazing.
And
and being able to sleep, that's great.
Yeah. Well, because with the perimenopause and the vivid dreams, I actually am traumatized by my dreams now.
Well, I don't know who I was saying to the other day. It was maybe 7 or 8 days in a row where I had completely vivid and lucid, horrific dreams,
horrific,
weird stuff.
Yeah. Are you another person? Because I'm having these dreams where I'm another person and I'm doing these really horrible things as another person.
So every single one that I've had has been from my point of view, but not me. It's through another person, Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
a person doing things and like kind of going through the motions, and it's all like very strange, very
Yeah,
strange.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I don't know, one of them was like, I don't know, scaling like a volcano and like it was erupting. And that was horrific because I have a lifelong phobia of lava and it's been horrific to see that. And then the hot flash, so I'm boiling, I'm hot in the
Yes.
it's like this, exciting like 4D experience of seeing this dream and feeling the heat. And I'm like, I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I wake up, I'm like, oh, what was that? Why?
I don't know, like some of mine, they are so disturbing.
Yeah.
I am just like, I don't want to remember. I don't want to know. I
Yeah.
don't want to be in this headspace. Like, you know how once upon a time you used to dream and you'd be like, oh, that was a nice dream.
It's like, do I need therapy for this dream now?
Yes, it never happens anymore. It's so strange how the biochemistry just changes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that because this is,
Hope it helps somebody, even
yes,
in your 30s, it is possible. So
it is. It is. But what's something that you're working on coming up? What's your next project, your next novel, your next work?
So there's a few that are coming out actually this year. So exciting. I've got 3 releases this year. So I've got the 3rd book from the Heart of Darkness series. So that is Queen of Heart. Epic continuation, lots of action. So that's a sci-fi military thriller. And then I've got the 3rd book in my young adult dystopian trilogy, which has recently become a 4-book series. So that's great. Yay, they've signed on a 4th book, which is amazing. That one is also due out later this year. And then I've got The Redemption of Derek Wolfe, which is with my Aussie publisher. So that's another very heavy-hitting book. So that one is it's a detective novel. He and his partner are uncovering a trafficking ring in New York City. And she is somebody he's saved from the trafficking ring. So it's from her perspective and from his. So being that outsider who's trying to navigate what she's going through, but also from her perspective, having lived it and having that lived experience, also helping other women who've come out of it and helping to shut this ring down. So it's a fictional novel, but it definitely touches on all of those topics that I think are they're heavy hitting, but they're really necessary for people to talk about and understand because, trafficking sadly is quite prominent in the world to this day, probably even more so. And, it gets disguised in such, innocuous ways, like, the nice roommate who, is unassuming and suddenly turns out to be a trafficker and, before you know it, you're sucked into that ring. So it's addressing all of those types of things and I guess, raising the awareness of the prevalence of it.
Wonderful. And so just wanted to make sure that everyone knows where to find you. So we've got your website, Violeta Matijevic, and then you've also got the 2 Instagram accounts. So you've got one under your name, Violeta Bagia Writer.
Yep.
And then you've got, what was the other one?
Right Point Coaching.
Right Point Coaching. Beautiful. Yep. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about such heavy topics. I really think this is a Balkan strength.
I think so.
We do the heavy and we do the deep. We don't do surface.
No, and it's so important because the world is just everything surface level. Like let's get raw, let's get deep, let's make it uncomfortable.
Yes, I love that. That should be your logo, actually.
Yeah.
You should update your logo with that.
Let's get raw. Let's make it uncomfortable.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much, Violeta. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I'm gonna love looking forward to seeing how your career moves forward and develops.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Amra's Armchair Anecdotes. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow for more insights, stories, and inspiration. From my armchair to yours, remember, every story begins with a single word.